Fight Night Picks is brought to you by Strikeforce Energy. Head on over to the website, strikeforceenergy.com. If you enjoy the flavor of freedom, the company's veteran-owned and everything's made in America. They've got great apparel. You can turn any 16.9-ounce beverage into an energy drink. There's no sugar, no calories, no stirring, or no shaking required. They also have a line of different products as well as Strikeforce coffee. So if I head into my cart, I've got a 4-count sample pack. I've got a 20-ounce coffee mug. And if I head into that checkout, use the promo code FNP, click to apply, and you're going to save 20% off any order. That's FNP at strikeforceenergy.com.
It's time
for 15 minutes of non-stop MMA, tackling the biggest news in the sport. Head into the chat and let us know how you feel. Live from Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, here's your host, Craig Allen.
And with that, we are back. We are live for another edition of Fight Night Picks Kicks. We got a big card coming up tonight. And yes, unfortunately, it is on pay-per-view. They want your money, but they have to pay for that $100 million UFC Apex facility from Vegas. If this is the first time you're joining, at Craig Allen FNP, you can find me there on Twitter and Instagram. And thank you so much for joining in. We've got a busy card. Like I said, a lot of people already in the chat. Keep hitting us up in the chat. Hit us up with a super chat. Help us out a little bit. Sometimes that gets a little bit interesting, and we get a better chance at actually seeing your comment and getting to it. Now, typically with these shows, yes, it is myself and Matt. Matt, new job, new opportunities, new possibilities, so you can't be here to join me today. But I am going to go down through the entire card, kind of go back, recap of our picks. We actually agreed on every single fight, which rarely, if ever, happens with some of these cards, especially the bigger ones. So it'll be really interesting to see what everybody goes with, especially, like I said, in the chat. We'll recap that in your Fight Night Picks. But the point of Fight Night Picks Kicks, we get into the fight of the night. We get into storylines. We get into top prospect, title implications, and then again, recapping the entire card. So I see up there Jose Fernandez joining us, Sergeant Streeter, Bahodir, Bakirov, Roy Gonzalez, producer Henny Boy, everybody in the chat. Really appreciate everybody there. We got somebody from Edmonton all the way across the country in Alberta. We're here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. Sir Billy Man 76 saying hi. So really appreciate you. Keep filling up that chat, and I will do my best to get to it. Now, I threw it out there in the description below with a fight in the night. Now, this is one of those cards, and it always differs between the Fight Night cards and the pay-per-view cards, because sometimes the fight of the night might just be on a Fight Night card, that main event. I'm thinking like Anthony Smith, Glover Teixeira, some of the bigger ones that we've had lately where there's a really big fight and you can make a pretty good case to say, hey, that's probably going to be the fight of the night. This is one that's not so cut and dry. I did throw down your main event down there, but of course you've got a Assuncao Garbrandt, your co-main. You've got Sterling and Sandhagen. You've got Sean O'Malley taking on the WEC legend, bantamweight champ Eddie Wineland. Hooper Caceres, Formiga Perez, to me, just kind of kicking it off there, my fight of the night is Formiga and Perez. I think that's such a really good fight and an underrated fight. And it's a shame that it's underrated because it's two of the best flyweights that are out there. Formiga on a 2-fight losing streak. Of course, Alex Perez won his last fight over Jordan Espinoza in North Carolina, rather. Virginia. Either way, really good fight there. A big win over Espinoza. And now you're coming in here and you're taking on a really tough, proven vet in a guy in Juicy Formiga. 35 years old. He's beaten some of the best. He has a win over your champ in Davison Figueiredo. So to me, that's the fight of the night. You could argue that there's a lot of really good ones on this card, but to me, that's the one that stands alone as your fight of the night. And today, again, typically what we do in these is we rip through some of the fights of the night and really get into the picks. We're going to get into the picks as we move along. Cornell Hayes Jr. saying, I'm so torn between Sterling Sandhagen. Marcos Amparo saying, I can't pick between Sandhagen or Sterling. We will get to that closer to the end of the show. So that's one of those ones that is really difficult. So we get into storylines, and in terms of storylines coming into this one, a lot of people were really critical, especially in the comments, of Amanda Nunes in her last fight against Jermaine Durandamy. And it's a really interesting thing that I wanted to bring up. In terms of the judges' scorecards on that, Sal D'Amato scored it 49-44 for Nunes, Dave Hagen 49-46, Ron McCarthy 49-45. So you had three different scores by 3 different judges, and Sal D'Amato giving more benefit to Amanda Nunes, a 10-8 first round, a 10-8 third round, with all the judges giving Germaine Durand the second round 10-9. So it'll be really interesting to see what we get out of Amanda Nunes here, because a lot of people, Dana White included, say, hey, Nunes looked pretty human in her last fight, although she did have 2 10-8 rounds, according to one of the judges that you will see call a lot of cards. So it's going to be interesting to see what we get. A lot of people are quick to say, too, oh, well, she didn't want to fight back a month ago when there was a chance to fight Felicia Spencer, and maybe she hasn't been in the gym, and maybe she's just not hungry anymore. You don't know that. I don't know that. I mean, if you look on any of the embedded videos, her girlfriend right now, Nina Ansaroff, is currently pregnant. So she has a lot of different things on her plate, in addition to the fact that she's on a 10-fight win streak and has beaten every single current and former champion in 2 different weight classes, now going to defend her second belt for the first time at 145 pounds. So I'll be really interested to see what happens there. And I'm sure it'll pop up in the comments as well. Sir Billyman76 saying Spencer will win by KO. I don't know about that, but there's a lot of people that are really high on Felicia Spencer. So much so that Aaron Bronstetter tweeted out, and I'll pull the tweet up, the fact that there's a lot of people that are really high right now on Felicia Spencer. To the point where, in his tweet says, UFC 250 could potentially crack the top 10 all-time most bet UFC cards in the history of BetOnline AG, per Dave Mason. He also says a lot of actions coming in on all the bouts. Prelims included 64% rather of the action for the main event is on Spencer. So the book will need Nunes to win for profit. So it's really interesting that way, that it's moving that way. Now we move into top prospect. Christopher Race saying, yo, what up, man? Christopher, how are you? Chad David Dowdle saying, thoughts on Hooper Stamann parlay. We're going to get into those as we roll along with your Fight Night picks. So I want to hear from you right now in the comments. Who's your top prospect that's on this card? Sugar Sean O'Malley, undefeated. And listen, this kid is a huge favorite right now, minus 550 at this time. So a pretty big prospect, but you could also make a point that Chase Hooper could be your biggest prospect on the card. I mean, if you look down through it, you've got some guys with less than 12 fights or so. Herbert Burns right on the cusp. Is he still a prospect? He's 32 years old. He's fought good competition, has a big win over Timofey Nastyukhin over one championship. And if you're in the know, Timofey Nastyukhin knocked out Eddie Alvarez when he went over there. So it's kind of crazy there. Hooper, again, 10 fights. You got Sean O'Malley at 11. Aljamain Sterling, Corey Sandhagen, big one there. So it's really tough to tell who you could have as your top prospect. But for me, it's Sean O'Malley. The ceiling's so high. He's such a favorite over a really big name. It'll be interesting if he does get the win here to see where he goes after this. Marco's saying my top one right now is Alonzo Menafield. The guy has tons and tons of finishes, whether it's first round, second round. Hits like an absolute force, like a Mack truck. And Alonzo Menafield, very interesting fight here tonight against a tough, proven guy in Devin Clark that's been there and done that in the UFC, and a former RFA light heavyweight champ for what that's worth before the promotion merged, and then you had LFA. So we continue on into title implications, and this is one where usually in the featured prelim you have some sort of title implications. If we go up and down through the card, UCA Formiga taking on Alex Perez. That one's close at 125, but not quite there. Your featured prelim, you've got a big young up-and-comer in Chase Hooper and Alex Caceres, who, again, this is his, 22nd fight in the UFC, which is crazy to think of. He's 15-12 right now. But Aljamain Sterling, Corey Sandhagen is that fight that has title implications. They've said it. The fact that maybe they let the cat out of the bag, but the winner of this is going to take on the winner of Piotr Jan and Jose Aldo. So it'll be really interesting to see what we get there in terms of who's going to win that fight, which brings me into the end of the show. We're already at 10 minutes. It's a short 15-minute show, but I'll allow it to go a little bit longer. So, your Fight Night picks. I'm going to go through this card. I'm going to state my case for every fight like we talked about. Danny D, great work as usual with the $2 super chat. Danny, I appreciate you. Rock on. Have a good night. Enjoy the fights and a really good card. And want to say thanks for that. And thanks for everybody for supporting us. Before I go through the card, We just reached over 5,000 subscribers, and I never really thought that that was something that could even be possible with Fight Night Picks back when we started 2 years ago. So that's great, and really appreciate that one. Jason Craig saying Hooper's striking is so bad, might get picked apart. Jason, the counter to that is the fact that he might be greener in the striking department. The guy's 20 years old. He started fighting as an amateur at 16. He hasn't lost a fight. The only one that he's lost was that split draw, if I'm not mistaken, right after his Contender Series fight that was a decision. So if you go back and you look at his last fight, yeah, he was fighting the lesser of the Tamor brothers. He got hit a couple times. He got cracked, but then eventually he was able to get the finish. And if you go back a little bit and you watch some guys that maybe grappling heavy, this and that, Sergeant Streeter, $4.99. Love the channel, bro. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Christopher Reyes, if we could get 10,000 subs, I cross my fingers and my toes. Like I keep saying, we have big plans coming up. We have big plans. We've already put those plans in motion. We just brought back Fight Night Picks Early Stoppage, so podcast where we go through a lot of different topics. It changes all the time, but we've got some other stuff coming on the website, and we brought in a couple of new players, so you're gonna have to wait to see that happen. But yeah, in terms of Chase Hooper, he's a really interesting guy because he's green in his striking, but go back and watch Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen on the come up, LFA, becomes middleweight champ, comes into the UFC, is on Contender Series. He takes on Kevin Holland, and he gets cracked, and he's bleeding, and he looks like the fight's going to be over. If that fight ends and gets out of the first round, that's it for Brendan Allen. And hey, where's the ceiling there? Because he's a big prospect already. And then boom, all of a sudden, brings in the jiu-jitsu, gets the finish. So you can kind of make some comparisons between Chase Hooper and a lot of different people. It's kind of crazy how tall he is and how thin he is for his division. But I really think Alex Caceres, win or lose, is a pretty good measuring stick in that division to figure out what you have with Chase Hooper. Because if you look at Alex Caceres' losses to guys in the division, it's typically to guys who have really, really good grappling. And we're talking about the Jason Knights. And yeah, it didn't work out that great for Jason Knight. He did lose to the greatest of all time in Artem Lobov and BKFC. But he's got submission losses to Crone Gracie, Jason Knight, who else? Uriah Faber. Like, he's fought some of the best in his time in the UFC. So I just want to spend a little bit of time on that. But if we go back through the card and you want to know the old Fight Night picks, this is the opportunity where we get the chance to, maybe we change our picks. Maybe we do a couple different things here. So looking at Herbert Burns and Evan Dunham for what the fight's worth, it's a catch weight of 150 pounds. They already agreed on that. It wasn't the fact that one of these guys weighed in over the limit. If you look at it, though, Evan Dunham at 18-8-1, Matt made a really good point in the prediction video. If you catch Evan Dunham to the body, it's really, really difficult for him to come back from that. And he's an older guy. Listen, he has the experience. He's faced really tough opponents. It's kind of crazy that Evan Dunham and both Eddie Wineland are on this card. But Herbert Burns, to me, right now, seems like the real deal. 10-2. He's won his last 4 fights, all by finish before the end of the second round. He beat Derek Minner by triangle choke, and Derek Minner's no joke. He was the real deal on the regional scene. Of course, he's since gotten an opportunity in the UFC, even though he lost on Contender Series in 2019. But the win over Nate Landwehr, it was kind of like, well, I remember I picked Nate Landwehr to win that fight, but Nate Landwehr, good at wrestling, decent hands, but the opportunity for Nate Landwehr to really push the pace and get a big win there, and it just didn't happen, and Herbert Burns was able to take over. So if he can even push the pace, and a really good point brought up here by Jason Craig saying thoughts on a smaller cage, I think it makes it better. We've covered an event. The first event we covered was an 18-foot cage, and it's all action, all finishes, which you saw a lot of action last weekend with the Fight Night card, and I expect it to continue rolling tonight. Maybe there's those long breaks between the action, and nobody really likes those because you get to see the promo of Felicia Spencer and Amanda Nunes another 20 or 25 times. But realistically, it makes for a good fight. And I'm going to stick with the pick of Herbert Burns, who right now is an average of a -232 on bestfightodds.com. That's normally where we go for our odds. Next one, Alonzo Menafield taking on Devin Clark. Again, interesting one. Devin Clark, his wrestling's decent. If he threw a leg kick, it would be the cat's behind because he has the biggest tree trunks of legs that you've ever seen in your entire life. And as you know, Alonzo Menafield, tons and tons of power in his hands. And as long as the wrestling defense can hold up, he should be able to get a win there. And I know a lot of people were critical of, Alonzo Menafield hasn't fought good competition. Well, the last time I checked, Vinicius Moreira was pretty good at locking down submissions. And so is Paul Craig. And Paul Craig threw that lazy spin kick to the body. Menafield caught him hard and finished him and put him out. So Alonzo Menafield, if he can crack Devin Clark on the weigh-in, I would still expect him to get a win. I don't know if I like that one in terms of tossing some cheddar down because he's a minus 222 favorite. I know producer Henny Boy saying he's going to take him, and also Devin Davis saying that Devin Clark gets hit a lot. It's true, he does get hit quite a bit, so that's one of those things that you have to worry about. That's probably not the most confident pick that's on this card, so throw that one out there where it is. But still, again, taking Alonzo Menafield to get the win. Then you've got Formiga and Perez, which I'm still surprised. The line shifted, and they've gone closer to par. Juicy Formiga all day. I understand he's lost 2 in a row. He's faced the best competition in the UFC for a very long time. I know he's 9-6, which is a salty record to have in the UFC, but he's faced some of the best guys out there, and Alex Perez just hasn't been there yet, even though he has 2 less fights total in his career than Juicy Formiga at 23-5 versus Formiga's 23-7. But again, the guys that he's faced in the UFC, he beat Kevin Gray, then he fought Carlos John de Tomas, Eric Shelton, Jose Torres, Joseph Benavidez, lost by first round finish, Mark De La Rosa, Jordan Espinoza. Who's still in the UFC? Benavidez, De La Rosa, and De La Rosa's on a bad losing streak, and Jordan Espinoza is, and he finished him. So it's not really the biggest sample size, and it's not really the best sample size, but you kind of get an idea there. And for me, Jussier Formiga is the type of guy that's going to be able to get it done in that fight and really move forward and keep his spot in the division. The next one, Charles Byrd taking on Maki Pitolo. It's interesting because Pitolo, for what it's worth, at 185 pounds, because he's moving up from 170 to 185, and he's fought there before. But if you look at that one, Maki Pitolo in his last fight, when he fought Callum Potter, yeah, it was on kind of some short notice and what have you. It was a poor showing. It was a very poor showing. So if you look at that one, and then you look at Charles Byrd at 10-6, not a great record. He's lost 2 in a row, both of them by finish, but they're the good opponents. I know Darren Stewart lost to Bartosz Fabinski in his last fight, and somebody challenged me by saying that it wasn't in Cage Warriors, but they wore Cage Warriors gloves and they wore different shorts. Maybe they got paid by the UFC, but it's still under the Cage Warriors banner. Point being there is he's lost a good competition. He's beat run-of-the-mill guys like Quentin Henry, Jamie Pickett, Randall Wallace, guys that people might recognize, and then John Phillips is kind of the cherry on top. And I know John Phillips, since that fight, has looked quite good. But still, for what it's worth to me, you look at the odds on this one, Charles Byrd, a minus 182 average. I mean, that's really kind of grasping at straws there too, because the fight's a lot closer than that. But again, if Charles Byrd can unleash quite a bit of power, he should be able to get the win there. And I know that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but still going with Charles Byrd. The next one, Cody Stamann, Brian Kelleher. Again, you have to say stuff like this, but thoughts and prayers to Cody Stamann, whose brother passed away, unfortunately, here recently. And he's still going to be competing, which is kind of crazy. Taking on Brian Kelleher, who's on a huge roll right now. I mean, just absolutely unleashing just crazy, I don't know, power, fury, pick an adjective, you use it. It's interesting this at 145 pounds. I mentioned in the breakdown video the fact that Cody Stamann hasn't fought at 145 since his UFC debut against Terrion Ware. And also, please, if you're watching this, check Terrion Ware's Tapology or Sherdog or whatever. He fought some really big names when he was in the UFC, and he was on the wrong end there. Gerger Binks saying cheers from Sask. Listen, how is Saskatchewan these days? It's probably really warm and yellow and flat. That's what I would assume there from Saskatchewan. But in terms of Cody Stamann, Brian Kelleher, gonna stick with it and go with Cody Stamann. I mean, the wrestling's great in the scrambles. He's fought a better striker in Song Yadong, and yes, it was just a draw, and you can make a case for either guy, but you have to stick with Cody Stamann in that one. So gonna go with Stamann there, making it interesting. Now, if we continue on and we look forward, Ian Heinisch, Gerald Mearshart, a fight that is it on the card? Is it not on the card? Because it turned out that all of a sudden it seemed like one of Ian Heinisch's corners was going to have to, go away, I guess, and I realized I froze there just not that long ago, so apologize for that. I don't really know what was happening. But yeah, it seemed like that fight wasn't going to happen. Now it is. You're fine. Anthony Ivy, who was going to be brought in on short notice, has been pushed off until next weekend. He's going to be taking on Christian Aguilar on the next card, so keep that one in mind. But if you look at this fight for what it's worth, Ian Heinisch, decent striking. I know he's lost his last 2 in a row. Pretty good wrestling, and he can get away from grapplers. You saw that against Cesar Fahey. You saw that against a really tough fighter in Antonio Carlos Jr. He was able to get out of those. Gerald Meerschaert, it's kind of that question of technique and looping shots. And Justin Gaethje was the type of guy that really refined everything, and he went from just throwing wild power to really making some adjustments and becoming a more technical striker under the tutelage of Trevor Whitman, who was there all along, but it continues to get bigger and better for him. Ian Heinisch training at Tiger Muay Thai, which is really interesting for a portion of his camp before I had to come back to the States. Still sticking with him. Then you got Chase Hooper take on Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres. That one, Hooper is a pretty sizable favorite. If I look it up here right now, he's a minus 208 favorite. So hard to go against the guy in Chase Hooper in that spot. I understand Alex Caceres is a good striker. He's a very unorthodox striker, but there's not a ton of power behind those strikes. And we saw where Tamor was able to hit Hooper with a little bit of power. He kind of made it through that adversity, and then he was able to settle down and get the finish. So I would stick with Hooper there, especially in a big spot. Not that it means that much, but it's a big spot being the featured prelim before a pay-per-view card like this. Then you have the other big power player in Sean O'Malley taking on Eddie Wineland, and there's not much I can say about that. I mean, Eddie Wineland's as tough as they get. But toughness only really gets you so far when you're taking on kind of that next wave and that next level of talent in a guy like Sugar Sean O'Malley, who looked a little drawn out at weigh-ins, but should be fine. And kind of neat his whole story with his coach there, Tim Welch. So really looking forward to that fight. Then you got Neil Magny, Anthony Rocco Martin. I've got a quarter here. Heads it's Magny, tails it's Rocco. Heads, it's Magny. I mean, really, that's how you could make a pick like that. That's such a close fight. It's all going to come down to where it's a shorter cage. Can Neil Magny really figure out distance, or will Rocco Martin push the pace? And Rocco Martin, I can't believe that he made lightweight before, and now he's really found a great home at welterweight, kind of like the Gilbert Burns, or pick a fighter that's had success moving up. Anthony Smith from 185 to 205. But sticking with Neil Magny there. Looked great against Li Jingliang in his last time out. And not to say that Martin hasn't looked good lately. It's just there's a lot of things going in that fight for Neil Magny. So going with Neil Magny there. Scott is saying, should I go with Magny or Bird? I would fade both of those if it was me. That's what I would do in that case. Now, Aljamain Sterling, Corey Sandhagen, possibly your fight of the night. That's a really good one. And again, winner, title shot possibly. You've got Aljamain Sterling, who's so unorthodox. Go back and watch that fight against Pedro Munoz, throwing the back elbow similar to the Korean Zombie. It's like he can do so many different things, throws some nice kicks, switches stances. And oh, by the way, really, really good in the grappling department. And Corey Sandhagen, not that he's a carbon copy, but they do share a lot of similarities. And Corey Sandhagen, the fun thing to watch is his footwork. And the guy can just get on his bike and cruise for 3 rounds and look like he's hardly breaking a sweat. He can do pretty well everything in there. It's a very close fight and a very difficult one to try and predict. But I'm going to stick with the slight favorite, and these odds are basically par at this point, in Aljamain Sterling to get the win. Then in your co-main, you have a really tough one. Again, you've got Raphael Assuncao and Cody Garbrandt. And a lot of people were critical of the fact that if you look at Garbrandt's 3 losses, Dillashaw, and Munoz. And a lot of people were saying, well, they're performance-enhancing users. They were both suspended. TJ Dillashaw, his old samples, they went back and tested them, and at least one of them showed up with EPO in his system. But Pedro Munoz tested positive in 2014 and served a sentence. So it's really tough to try and look back at all of that. We didn't have a chance to kind of go down that rabbit hole in the prediction video because we don't have a whole lot of time, and I'm not going to get too far into that one. So you have to kind of wonder what if any, effect that would have had in Garbrandt's last fights. But he said it himself, or it was said this week, that when he clashed heads with Pedro Munoz, he saw red and just went absolutely ballistic and started throwing as hard as he could until he got finished. And every single fight that he's been finished in, so those 3, it was right hand, right hand, right hand. It's almost like the opposite of Luke Rockhold getting caught by the left. So if you look at Cody Garbrandt, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I've watched these fights 2 or 3 times by now today, right hook, and then right overhand, in that order, if I'm not mistaken. So it's tough, but Cody Garbrandt's been training with Mark Henry in Jersey. It's weird the way that his corner is going to be set up, or the guys that he's had around him, because he's had Mark Henry, but he's also had Kurt Hollabaugh from Team Alpha Male, and Mike Malott, the Canadian. So really interesting corner there. Some Team Alpha Male guys, some of his new camp as well. But again, you have to go, or I'm going to go with Cody Garbrandt here. I put myself out there by going with Garbrandt. But you look at what he can do and the power in his hands, the speed in his hands, the speed with which he can throw combination. And again, Cool the Fool saying Cody got that Kimbo beard. He's Gucci now. He does have quite the beard. Doesn't have as good of a hair as old Craig Allen, but pretty good beard nonetheless. But gonna go with Garbrandt. But that's a really tough test. I mean, it's not an easy one taking on a guy like Assuncao. And Assuncao too. I put this out there. I want to say it was in the comments under that video. Raphael Assuncao has landed 2 knockdowns in his UFC career, and he has 2 knockout wins as well. So interesting stuff there. And Luke saying Chris Holdsworth, not Kurt Hollabaugh. Thank you for that, Luke. I get the 2 of them mixed up in my head, and I appreciate that. So thank you. And then in our main event, of course, Amanda Nunes, Felicia Spencer, and you can talk a lot about legacy, and that's where this fight kind of lends itself, because if Nunes wins, defended the belt at bantamweight and at featherweight, beat all the current and former champions, and then she'd be adding another name to that list in Felicia Spencer, somebody who was an Invicta champ at featherweight. She's fought at featherweight for quite some time, so it's almost, the natural featherweight type instead of a Holly Holm or Jermaine Durandamy or whoever else that's not Spencer, Cyborg, or Megan Anderson, because a lot of bantamweights have moved up to featherweight, and it's just tough to find fighters at featherweight to compete in the UFC. But you can't deny Amanda Nunes. The power, maybe you can say her grappling didn't look all that great in her last fight, this and that, but if you look at the fight against Jermaine Durandamy, 199 to 126 were the strikes. Danny D saying Felicia finishes Amanda. Listen, there's a lot of people out there that agree with you, Danny. So first of all, appreciate the super chat. But second of all, I'm gonna go with Nunes. I know Yadav has said Nunes will win 3 times, and I agree with you, Yadav. Spudaby is saying I got Nunes winning in the second round. I'm not gonna get into the game of trying to figure out what round it would be in, this and that. But if you're Felicia Spencer and you look at that fight that she had against Megan Anderson, underdog, came into the fight, with a head of steam, and then just comes in here and absolutely ragdolls Megan Anderson. I almost said Miguel. Megan Anderson gets her to the mat and finishes her, and had a great performance there. In that fight against Chris Cyborg, it was a really tough one. I know she didn't get finished, but she got absolutely, beaten quite bad. I mean, they were 30-27 scores in terms of total strikes. It was 138 to 64. And she did come back, actually. Or not even come back. She was consistent in just about every single round. So she did have that one going for her. But I just see it the way of Amanda Nunes. It's really tough to not pick Nunes in that fight. But there are a lot of people picking Felicia Spencer, and the lines actually closed a little bit since they opened. So to recap with that, going with Nunes in the main event. There's a lot of stuff on the line here. There's a lot of really good fights. And I just want to say this first and foremost. I mean, we just reached over 5,000 subscribers. I really appreciate everybody that's in the chat, that comments all the time, that tosses out the likes. We never really say, subscribe and like and all that, because you do it already. So we really do appreciate that. And I do my best to try and get in the chat as much as I can and interact with everybody. So I wanted to say that it really does mean a lot for us. and really appreciate everybody out there. So enjoy the fights tonight. UFC 250. Hopefully everybody's staying safe and is able to really enjoy this one. And we'll be back again with more picks for the next card. And ooh boy, is it something. That June 13th card, we're going to have to do a lot of tape study and hoping to have those videos out before Monday. Probably Monday night, but before Monday. So sorry we can't overlap them. Sorry Matt couldn't be here. It's just Craig. But yeah, really appreciate everybody tuning in and enjoy the fights. We'll see you next week.
It's time!
For 15 minutes of non-stop MMA, tackling the biggest news in the sport. Head into the chat and let us know how you feel. Live from Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. Here's your host.